no, tomorrow night. He said, well, I'm flying home tomorrow night, and that's Seattle. So, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to sit on that for a minute. So we were able to ask him to give the PowerPoint presentation that he was going to give us live tonight. He recorded it last night. For those few of us who were here, we're going to see it. And I'm going to just tell you a little bit about it so you know what you're looking at. And then the group that was here and that has been working with him on research will come up and share a little bit of research with you and their experience of working on this research. So we have had a project in the works with John for over a year called CARA, Catechists, Action and Research Alliance. And it's based on a Montessori research method called Teacher Action Research. And it's done in the classroom, and it's teachers sorting out their own challenges, like a child always trips when they go through that door. What's wrong with the door? And so they have a theory, and they test their theory, and they figure out a solution. It's a very simple, very practical. It's not about theory, it's about its practice. And so I have been looking since we started the center in 1995 for a way for us catechists to continue the very, very fine research on which our catechesis is built. And we have little problems to solve in our atrium, we have bigger problems to solve maybe for our denomination, or maybe they're related to what's going on in the world right now, or maybe they're related to new things that our materials don't take into account. So how will those be refined in the best way possible? And when I heard about teacher action research, I thought, they developed that about a certain number of years after Maria Montessori died. And they had to do it because she had outdated materials. And they wanted to keep the very strong, fine tradition of well-researched materials alive in Montessori. And John Chattin-McNichols was one of the two people that sort of introduced and brought it into the Montessori community and began to teach people how to do this. So I called John. I said, how about you do this for us catechists too? And he said, okay. He works with EM Standing. He was working. He's now retired. But up until last year, he was working at the EM Standing Montessori Institute that's part of Seattle University. So he had some familiarity with that history or that part of Montessori studies. So John had created a PowerPoint to introduce us to teacher action research as they've used it in Montessori. And then it's sort of our job to say, all right, how can I use that in my work as a catechist? So what you're going to see is his introduction to teacher action research for a Montessori group. The method we're using is the same. The setting is not a Montessori classroom, but an atrium. And so that's the adaptation that we'll be making. So I think I wanted to get a 6-foot poster to put here next to John is a very tall man. Couldn't get it. So anyway, there we go. We'll have to imagine. And then we'll take questions to clarify what he said immediately after that, and then the rest of us will come up and share some of our. And Tim may need a minute to.
What is the name of the name?
John Chattin, CHATTIN -McNichols. McNichols.
Practitioners, and my examples in this talk are going to be from Montessori schools because that's what I've done the most work for in doing this. So there's a picture of a Montessori school in Nicaragua. I usually like to start this with a quiz question. What was the title? I have a large audience here, so we're filming this. The title of Montessori's first book. It got published as the Montessori Method. But what was it actually titled when it was her title? There is no reward because this is Montessori. So it was actually called, in the original one, 1912, or the most common one, Montessori method, scientific pedagogy applied to the teaching or applied to child education in children's houses, but the original one in 1909 just had the second part, scientific pedagogy. So Montessori, in her very first book, had us thinking about not the Montessori method, not her method, but the method of scientific pedagogy. In other words, she's talking about the idea that the classroom is a laboratory and the teacher is a researcher. That's what scientific pedagogy means. This seems unlikely, and in doing training of practitioners for action research with the late Dr. Peggy Leffler, who was a Montessori teacher and a researcher and a teacher educator, she used to give this introduction to the idea. Suppose a Montessori early childhood teacher notices that a certain coring exercise in the practical life is just not getting any love at all. That students are avoiding it like the plague. It's literally gathering dust. So in her busy morning, going around doing everything that a Montessori teacher does, she's trying to think about what could have gone wrong with this activity. Why is it getting no attention? Why is it sitting there all by itself? So I'm going to ask again my large audience if they have an idea why a Montessori material would be neglected.
It drips.
Okay, so it's a faulty thing that doesn't work very well. Or maybe it's partially broken. That's not going to be attractive for children. Could also have been that it's too easy for everybody in the classroom. Nobody's attracted for it because they're past it. Could be with pouring, it's unlikely, but it could be that it's too hard. So here's some of the ideas. Too easy, too hard. Also, maybe you did a terrible presentation. Maybe the child got an electric shock in the classroom from a loose wire when we were presenting that, and everybody hates it. They've been conditioned against it. Or the materials are ugly.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
It's always an interesting dynamic doing observation in a strange person's 36 classroom when you look at their practical life and it looks like bargain time at Goodwill. It's just regular Goodwill is fine, but bargain time at Goodwill, stuff doesn't match. It's mostly Melmac, and so you don't want to say that. You don't want to say out loud to someone your practical life is ugly, because that's kind of a deep personal insult. But it could be. It's not an attractive material. These things are hypotheses. These are your ideas of what's behind what you're observing, and then the teacher tries to think about this again, maybe overnight, talking with an uncaring spouse that doesn't care about Montessori and practical life, and says, well, maybe it's this and maybe it's that. She decides that the first three, it's not really too hard, it's not too easy, it's right in the middle of the class thing. The presentation was fine because kids used it after the presentation. So maybe the material is not that attractive. And I may now imagine that this teacher is going to test this hypothesis. Well, that's a research project. It's a tiny little mini research project that the teacher is doing, and she's going to now collect some data. So the next morning, she uses the all-purpose fix-it for 3 to 6 Montessori pouring work, food coloring. So she just puts a drop of her choice, and she pours that, and you have to take a ticket. You have to take a number to use that. It's suddenly very exciting. So she takes that as confirmation of her hypothesis and the fact that things need a little jazzing up every once in a while, and that you need to be aware of not just setting your environment out the whole time, but setting it out and then refreshing it all the time. So Peggy Leffler again would say that most teachers engage in many of these small observational studies in their classroom every week. They're constantly checking to see, why is that table so noisy? It's like the British Parliament. What is going on there? What's causing that? Is it this? Is it that? I'm going to split it. It's like a 6-person table. I'm going to give that table to another unsuspecting 3 to 6 and take back 3 2-person. And suddenly, it's like inside of the library. Are you with me? All of those ideas of changing your environment can be little experiments. And this way of repeating these just mini research projects is the way that good teachers, regardless of Montessori or not, fine-tune their classrooms. So this was a curriculum example. So we're looking at a particular piece of curriculum. How could we open this up to other categories? What other kinds of research might you be doing? A large audience is now cogitating this from a large and skilled expert audience. Well, one thing is that was a 3 to 6 example. So we could do a toddler example. We could do a 6 to 9 example. We could do some other age range. How else could we expand our repertoire here? So that was curriculum. You could also do instructional things. How do you use the material? What kind of presentation is going to give you a better output? Should, for example, I slow down when I present to children? Yes, the answer is I should slow down. What is it? Does it help or hurt if when you're talking in a presentation, you also, at the same time, are signing? Does that help or hurt? We don't know the answer to that as far as I know. Or is it a process question? What is going on with children re-entering the room after recess? Why does that look like certain segments of Mad Max movies? Is there something that's not making them slow down, and so on? And this is just the start of all the different kinds of things that you can find. So to do action research, these are basic examples. The usual actual research program or thing that a teacher takes on for their particular research idea is a little more complicated than these tiny ones. But it's a very straightforward thing to do. And one of the big troubles, though, is that it's a hard thing to ask a full-time, hard-working teacher to take the extra time to do this research project. So one of the things that's important to work on as you think about doing this, both with the person who's starting off doing it and you as a researcher, is what can I do to make hard areas like collection of data as easy as possible? So important questions or issues that are there for them. So practitioner research is not used very much to influence theory. It's made to influence your practice in your classroom. And that would be the same if you did non-Montessori teachers or if you did Catechists of the Good Shepherd teachers and so on. Guides. So if you find out if other research has been done, that would be good to look at. But most times, for the things that teachers are looking for, very little has been done. So you are on your own. You can find things that are close enough to give you ideas. But a lot of this you'll just have to make on your own. So one of the big questions about research should be categories that it falls into are qualitative and quantitative. So if you think of the qualitative as being anthropological, that means you'd be doing a lot of observing in the classroom and you wouldn't necessarily have a form to check. You'd be doing open-ended observations in your classroom. And the data that's coming into you isn't coming off of a test or an observation form that gives you a number. When you do that, you're doing quantitative research. So the big question between those two is it numerical, because that would be called quantitative, or is it non-numerical, qualitative? There's also mixed methods where people use a little of both of those things, and mixed methods is growing in the numbers of studies that use that, and it's something I really encourage people to think about for their choices, because you can do a lot of the richness of observation or interviewing, asking students why they're doing something or what they did, and then also maybe do something that's numerical. Watch how often they are concentrating when you look at them and so on. I guess I should say in here too, when I say observation, I'm saying that like it's a single thing, but there's whole books and courses on observation. So there's lots and lots of ways. So that's another area of brainstorming about the kind of observation you're going to do before you jump in is probably a really good idea. So with Montessori teachers over a number of years, we found that a sharing time at the end of the process is very beneficial. Teachers are often very aware of a small sample, limited data, and so on. But the other teachers in the group really appreciated what they'd done, and their findings were often very applicable to the other teachers. So by presenting this to a peer group of teachers, you really get more of a sense of how much you've learned and how valuable your work has been for the other teachers. More likely to continue it and share it in our experiences. Also, cooperative projects, although they're more work, were often the people who ended up sticking with the project and going on and doing a second round or a third round of the research as well. So now I'm going to give you, as it says, 7 examples from the time when we did this with Montessori teachers. This is one when it was very fun, where we actually got to go to another country to do it. So this was in Australia. It was a nationwide group of 22 teachers that came together. And this one teacher was from a pretty small town in northwestern Australia, so north of Perth, not very many big cities up there. She'd been teaching for a long time, several decades, 3 to 6. And she said, I see these children, and they're what I call walk-by learners. I'll watch someone who's doing, I made up walk-by learners. She didn't say that, so I'm conflating things. They walk by the work. And so the Montessori teacher would say, would you like me to show you that work? No. And then sometimes she didn't ask. She said, come with me. And she showed the work. Now, would you like your turn? No. Don't want me to do it. They just walked by. So she called them, the ones who were the ones that used their hands and the ones that almost never did. So she had a very simple thing. She just kept track of which children were the walkers and which children were the doers. And then at the end of the year, she said, we're going to play a game. And she picked sensorial, and she had like 10 sensorial materials. And I would like you to pretend to be the teacher, and I will be the child, and I want you to present all 10 of these materials. Are you with me? So then she got for the whole class, with her assistant carrying the rest of the class, to see how they did on 10 sensorials. And guess what? The walk-by learners had learned just as much. And she had an insight to that, which I thought was very interesting. She said that the training that she received as a Montessori teacher totally focused on hands-on learning. That's kind of one of the watchwords of Montessori. And you certainly want to have that available for the many children who are, but not all of them are. And so her feeling was that the training really didn't prepare her for teaching those children who were mainly visual learners. And, again, we don't want to make sweeping statements from one classroom, but it seems like those walk-by learners were getting the same thing. And they were watching very intently. They got slow walking as they went by. So again, just a single teacher, single assessment at the end of the year, keeping track of who were the walkers and not. So she was able to fit that into her busy thing and come up with a very satisfying conclusion for her. So this is one in the United States, 3 to 6. This was a teacher who was wanting to look at the pattern of use in materials. And one of my roles as a helper was to narrow her project down. So we figured on sensorial, and she said, I can't keep track of all these things. I just want to look at one material. And she came up with the thing that I've used ever more in all sorts of situations for people to be able to gather data without going crazy. She just took a small box about this big, and of course, being a Montessori teacher, covered with beautiful paper, and then had a slit in it. Next to it was a bowl of white poker chips. And the deal was, in her classroom, she announced this to the whole class, and everybody was actually fine with it and enjoyed it. When you went to use the pink tower, you needed to put a chip in the box so that you could buy the rental. You could use that material. So she had a lovely graph for the whole school year of the use of the pink tower. And of course, it started high, especially with that. She thought she didn't have data to show that, of course, because she started with the coins, but she thought that gave it more interest to the children. For those of you who can't see my eyes, they're nodding, but that's something. And it kind of meandered down. And then after Christmas, it took a sharp spike upward. Now again, what she has is this graph. The interpretation of what that means is something she's making up, and I'm relating to you. Is it certain that her interpretation is the right one? No, especially this is done in one classroom. That's actually one of the most interesting and most causing learning and use to try and figure this out. After Christmas, Pink Tower came off the shelf with a vengeance. She thought that, the whole Christmas time is exciting and fun for the children, but it's not work. It's not something that they choose and they engage with, and they do it to their own satisfaction, sit back having done that, and then put it back on the shelf. And so they were very happy to get back. And they often want a cruising, easy material to do, which would certainly be the pink tower for most of them. Meandering on into winter quarter and spring quarter, and it's going down. And then Tiny Tim is lost, the tiniest cube. And what happens? It actually goes up. Oh, pink tower was in the news. And then it goes down again. Oh, we found Tiny Tim. And that went all the way up. And then in the middle of this pure observational study, she had an idea, because it's getting now to spring quarter, and the use is low. Pink tower is like Milli Vanilli records. No one wants to buy it. That's a reference for old people.
Even I'm not old enough for that.
And so she did what I've suggested before that people do to engage children with something. Like one of the things I've used this to tell people to do is, if you want your older fives to start doing hard sensorial, then you do something with no child. Mm-hmm. So she did the pink tower all by herself and sat back, picked it up and put it away correctly. Boom, through the roof. Are you with me? So it's a very simple study, one material, but it's over the whole year. And I think you could say that gave some very satisfying results for that teacher. I mean, if I was a trainer doing 3 to 6 training, I would mention that in sensorial, because that we learned something there we didn't know before, which is pretty easy to do. And all you have to do is pour out the coins and make a number on your graph paper. You should any of the dozens of you should stop me with a question. Yeah. Our third one was an intervention, an actual sort of causal comparative experiment in quotes. So this teacher was kind of annoyed. She was also, maybe later she started working as a trainer, but she was annoyed by the fact that when you were given presentations in your training, your Montessori teacher education program, the trainer, who I'll now portray, the trainer would say, yes, you may do this with 1, 2, 3 children. And when you give this presentation of fabric feeling, you may give them 2 or 3 fabrics. I'm not sure where the English accent came from. I just put it in there. And the trainers are all sort of hunched, waiting for their gruel break. The trainers say, well, your trainership, is it 2 or 3? It depends on the child, of course. And then that's all you get. It's just like, well, how do you tell? So she said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We got 4, it's a large school, we had 4 3 to 6 classrooms. You can have these 4 teachers that agree to cooperate. Half of you are going to give presentations with 2 fabrics, and half of you are going to give presentations with 3 fabrics. And in 2 weeks, you give a test by just asking them to name the fabrics that you put out. And the answer is available for only $100. No, the answer is that there wasn't any difference. So the 3rd fabric was almost never remembered. But again, is this going to be true in every Montessori school in the world? We don't know. But still, you should say, and again, if I were a trainer, it would be good to know that. Start with 2. If you've got a real hot shot and wants more, great. Let's start with 2. That's an actual thing we can now say as a result of one single thing in 4 classrooms that she coerced these people to do. This one never got done, but I really liked it, so I'm mentioning it. And this is one that was a teacher ed thing. So she wanted to survey training programs. She was going to use either all the AMS ones or all the MACD accredited ones, which would bring a lot of their ones. And it was just basically a study on, do you teach the great lessons? I mean, many people who, if they're Montessorians watching this, the answer should be, what do you mean? Of course you're going to teach the great lessons. This is for 6 to 9 programs. What do you tell the children about the basic way in which these are presented? So what are the most basic ways? I would answer that question through some charts and storytelling and experiments. How important are these things? And do you include God with no hands? I would love to know. Because what I see in Montessori teacher ed now is a real push to get everything in and to not lose students. And so things are falling through the cracks.
The great lessons are falling through the cracks.
They are getting shortened up quite a bit. Yeah. The geometry of 3 to 6 has gotten to be, I've seen pretty weakness. Mm-hmm. You say to people in the training at the end, a question or a discussion point or something about constructive triangles. Oh yeah, those are those boxes, right? It's like, Those are rich materials. Anyway, that was a commercial. You didn't have to pay for that. So she never did that, so we don't know the answer. Too bad. That's a picture of a pangolin made out of pinecone bracts. It doesn't have anything to do with the slide, but I try to show it whenever I can because it's so cool. Noise level. So there's been a thing coming and going in a sine wave, but you should have music playing. Ideally Mozart, because Mozart's magic, as we all know, he wrote Magic Flute. And so therefore Mozart makes you smart. Or non-crazy people often just want to play classical music. And she said, well, I wonder if that adds to the noise level. So she got a decibel meter. Now you can have an app on your phone that will record that, and will record the average, and it records the highest thing. You know, if you had a jet airplane landing on your school, that would have a very big number. This was one of the rare things anymore. It used to be a common practice, but it's not anymore. These were half-day classes, so she had a morning class, same teacher in the same environment, and an afternoon class. And she would flip a coin as to which one got music. And then she would measure, she'd have two numbers at the end of the day, morning decibel average, afternoon decibel average. And finding again, it was, again, to me, was really interesting. The answer is the noise level was the same. So if you didn't have music, the noise level rose up to the same level. I mean, it wasn't perfectly exact, but it really was very close every year. Meaning to me that I would have music, because I would rather have music than chatter. I don't suggest like the great battle played Whitesnake on one morning, Metallic on the other, would determine the greatest death metal band, but whatever kind of music you like. Spelling. Let me just say, to introduce this one, one of the functions of practitioner research is to make you discouraged about how far we have to go. How's that for a bad statement? This was on invented spelling in 3 to 6. So remember that 3 to 6 invented spelling is in most people's mind an okay thing that is characteristic of those children. And the rationale in Montessori for allowing that is we want them to write, and we can work on orthographic spelling later. And in fact, what was seen, and this was a large study for a person, she actually published this in a book, it's a book chapter, about, anyway, she had a number of classrooms, and I was really disheartened at how many teachers said, no, I correct 3 to 6-year-olds spelling. And she studied enough so that she could tell you why. So one variable that influenced it, was it temporary, like movable alphabet, or something written on a chalkboard, or was it written down on paper? And teachers are much more likely to demand correction of permanent rather than temporary materials. Does that make sense? And was it private? It's going in the student's cubby versus being put up on the side of the room, or worse yet, out in the hallway. If it was for public observation and consumption, orthographic paranoia. She didn't use those words. Those are my words. And they're also a great band name, which I believe is still free if you need band names. So that was discouraging to me. It was in both public and private schools. And again, influenced by publicness of the writing and temporary versus permanent. So it's good to know that, even though for me that's discouraging. This is my last one. This is by, does anybody know Greg Nelson, the author? He wrote A Teacher's Bag of Tricks, which is still my favorite classroom management book. And is a professor now, has a PhD, is a professor at Bridgewater State in, I believe it's Massachusetts, is where that is. He also, more recently, wrote a very nice book on math before the number runs. So math for late toddlers and early preschool, made with stuff. The way you make up practical life rather than sending lots of money to a foreign country. So he was taking classes as a doc student while he was teaching in a Montessori classroom, 3 to 6. He was taking a class on sensation in young children, preschoolers, and he was going through the fact that children at that time were very, very sensitive to color, which of course makes perfect sense since Montessori says all this color coding stuff. But again, and I don't know the people listening to this now how much your Montessori background is, but this is the trinomial cube. It's got 27 pieces, and the children preschool do it as a puzzle. Almost always in Montessori, the same color, especially within a single material, means the same thing everywhere. So this yellow coloring means that you're looking at a 2 by 2 centimeter square, and this is a cube, so it's going to have 6 of those. A 3 centimeter square is blue, and so on. So on ones that are not the squares and not the cubes here, that's also true. And black means everything else. So red, yellow, and blue have a consistent meaning, but black means it's a rectangle, although there are 3 different rectangles. So Greg was scratching his head about this, and so he came up with 2 alternative paint jobs. And of course, like any big school, the school he was at had chipped and damaged trinomial cubes, which he repainted. And he had nicknames for them. He painted one all black. It was known as the stealth trinomial. So here you can see the 3 rectangles. That's a rectangle, that's a rectangle, and that's a rectangle. 3 rectangles, 3 colors, green, orange, and purple. So now there is no more black. That was the rainbow trinomial. To do this research, he had to randomly assign children to a trinomial. So that meant that the trinomial was no longer stored at child height. It was stored at teacher height in the closet. Did everyone's brain explode? No. It made it more attractive. Does that make sense to you? Because who's doing the trinomial? Late 4s and 5s. Do they want something special just for them? Oh yeah, I'm doing the black trinomial, all black. That's me. So no, it was fine. He had a chart that said Joe is color trinomial. And when he did that and recorded what he wanted, he looked at how frequently they took it out, how long they worked with it, and the number of mistakes they made, and how many of those mistakes they corrected. So 4 variables, and it was consistent. The winning trinomial was the best on all of those, which was the rainbow trinomial. In the middle was the stealth trinomial, and pulling up 3rd out of 3 was the trinomial that is in every class all around the world. It's the combination of colors, some colors meaning one thing, and other colors not meaning one thing, but 3 things, is confusing to the child, just as he suspected. That's what I have to say, except for the final thing of what does this do for people? So it's a great thing. I think it's too much to ask of beginning teachers. I think they're still learning what to do and how to have a life while teaching. But mid-career teachers, for refreshing them and reinvigorating them, giving an area in which he or he is an expert. And I'm going to put a big category up here, and then I'll give you examples. In my experience of having done this since 1986, it is a real incubator of leadership. So people who went through these early teacher research networks stepped up and gave a presentation in their regional or state association. And then took a big step, and instead of the Montessori group, they did it in the AEYCs. So the statewide or even the national AEYC. They ran for office in those organizations. Peggy and I used to joke for a while, there beginning in 86 till about 90, every time there was a board election, the percentage of people on the American Montessori Society board who were graduates of the Teachers Research Network went up. It looked like a secret conspiracy of Peggy and I to stuff the board with our minions. But in fact, it was just super competent people who aspired to that and moved toward it. Going back to get a master's or a doctorate. Does that make any sense? Mm-hmm. It really makes you think. I mean, Peggy and I came to the conclusion that the research part was great, but actually the meal parts where you talk with other teachers. And again, you have to go back to the most basic thing about this, which is, what are you doing? You're questioning Montessori. You're saying Montessori is not here anymore. She's not with us to ask a question about this. I am here. I am in my classroom, and I'm going to ask the children this question. And I'm going to get an answer, and I'm going to not hide it under my hat. Although that's the hardest thing, is to get teacher researchers to share that, because they feel it's not laid out like that. And I hope you feel from these examples that a lot of these things would be really great for someone besides me to know in the whole world, or anyone who's listening to me go through this list. But this has a big impact, and I'll say one more example of this. So one of the things that happens is sometimes parents feel that they're not doing enough with their children and spending enough time with them, and they're angry about that because of their job or other things. And they take that out by treating teachers badly, by yelling at them. And this is the thing that maybe what's going on is it makes them feel like they're really advocating for their child and taking charge here. This worked well for me at work, just shouting in people's faces, so maybe it'll work with this teacher. Anyway, this particular dad was just telling the Montessori teacher she didn't know how to teach reading. I know what you should be doing. You should get rid of this Montessori crap. Do this and do this and do this. And she kept saying, well, I took my Montessori training here. It was a year-long training. It was very challenging. And I passed that. Blah, blah, blah. I have a master's degree. Blah, blah, blah. She said, why aren't you doing this? I said, well, actually, I tried that on my research and it didn't work. And the man literally took a step backwards. You did research? And the conversation was now on a different level. Right? With me about that, but suddenly some respect was being given there. However, temporarily, that might happen. But anyway, I think that this changes people more than just their knowledge about a specific thing, because it gives you a different attitude toward your own teaching practice. That you're really in charge and you can make your own decisions. And then I think I'll not put my audience on the spot to ask questions. And I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
To say, what was that? You know, if you wanted to clarify any particular piece of this before we just move into our next part of our conversation. Tracy's getting the lights covered. Gianna,
Is there a place where we can get more information about that? That was fantastic.
there is some on our website.
Okay.
Teacher action research is actually now a pretty big topic in AMS and then at workshops. You were at the conference, you've been at conferences.
Yeah.
I've gone to workshops there with 8 experts in the room guiding, 30 people through different aspects of the research.
Okay.
Another direction, Tracy. And AMS is also beginning to publish results in somewhere on their website. I think those
Is AMI involved with that?
not that I know of, but
Is it slides available?
yes.
We in California?
Right now they're in the CARA Dropbox, which is our group, our group Dropbox. But yes, we can move those over.
Yeah, that's great. I could not see it. You couldn't see it.
Yes, I know you couldn't see it. I know that was too bad. By the way, Tim is our engineer here, and it's a kind of embarrassing moment to introduce you, but he dropped everything and came over last night to do this, and he's here again tonight. He's going to be here tomorrow and Sunday. So thank you very much. This is a work in progress. Other questions? Yeah.
So there was the one thing that he was talking about decibel levels with music and without music, and about how the decibel levels are different. So what do you conclude from that? Having music as a background is a good thing? It didn't make it any louder.
So part of the noise of the group of music was music.
Yes.
And all of the noise of the group without music was chat.
Yes.
So he wanted to have less chat and more music. I was actually, are you making connections to atrium materials as you watch some of this? So with that one I was thinking, we often have the music maker being quiet in the room. It's just a nice little, no words, it's non-intrusive, but it does offer this kind of background music that's very 6 to 12 inches. Okay, great. So researchers. If I say I will do something and I don't do it, I usually just send me an email. Unless you see me writing it down, which I don't have a pen in my hand. Please feel free to remind me of things that I do. So we're just going to tell some of the highlights. We spent this morning 2 hours sharing what we had done. You can sit and stand up when it's your turn. It will help Tim, who's on the camera, because we're still live streaming. If we come and stand more closely now. No? Do we? Anyway, we spent 2 hours sharing out and getting encouragement and talking to each other and so on. And we're just going to get a snippet of some of the things that we've been working on this year. And Amanda is going to start.
So that was really heavy read. But we were writing what we were going to look at. I didn't have any big ideas I wanted to find out, but Catherine said, we're doing this, and I think you should like it, and I'd love to have you join us. So I said, okay. And yeah, the stuff we were learning, I mean, like, it's just fascinating. And so the only thing that really just came to me was, I've been doing Atrium since 1988, and my own children, my best friends' children, the whole church community since the time I started working with them since 1994, have been using the Catechists, and our kids are getting older and getting married, and I want to know, what do they remember? What impact did it have on them? And how do I find that out? I didn't get very far. But my dear husband, who we meet tomorrow, had a task of talking about in our community's 50th anniversary. What was POC's, our Pilgrims After Christ, is our church? And what was religious ed like for the last 50 years? So he said, I'm just going to ask some of these lovely families, some of these kids that are now adults, and he just constructed a very simple, softball, casual question. He gave people 2 days turnaround time via email and Facebook Messenger. And sure enough, he got 12 very decent responses and a couple other, I don't remember anything kind of responses. But that didn't require, hours and hours of agonizing surveying, but still, we got some results that they're not going to give us any blanket conclusions that people can use in other places. But they might be interesting to us. And it might, I thought, be interesting to some of you. I'm going to put together this information in a readable form and share what we found out. And it might just give you the idea that, maybe it's worthwhile just to ask, to put it out there to people and get people talking about what Atrium has done. So the very simple question he asked was, what is your impression of POC's, our church's religious education, and what impact did it have on you? And this was put to people that might have done their work way before my time, so maybe in the very early 70s, late 60s, all the way through my Atrium Catechesis work. So just going to read just a couple of responses, and then I'm going to pass it on to other people. But some of them are quite lovely. Here's the beginning of one. Few experiences have shaped me more than growing up in the POC's community, and religious education was the core of my POC's experience. It was where I developed my strongest moral beliefs about kindness, compassion, humility, and protecting the powerless that still guide me today. Most importantly, the cohort I grew up with in Atrium and then Journey to Adulthood became like family, and many of my favorite memories from growing up are with that group. And then he lists some of them. I was like, no. Okay then. And one more like that. And these are from people that are now 29 years old. So they were doing this back in 1994 on. Adrian taught me to view the world as a place of wonder and also as a place of storytelling. The parable of the pearl of great price is one that I will carry with me forever for interacting directly with stories and their social and spiritual impact. And that the power of our ideas and feelings is greater than the bounds of capital. That the love we have for each other goes beyond bodily and worldly constraints. It taught me that the gospel is a source of social change and community empowerment in song and in meaning. So, yeah, this makes me want to do more research, and expand my group, and ask some more questions, And it's nice to have a sample of people that are actually very willing to give you something back and support what you're doing. It's not a random sample, to be sure. But as I said, this was over 50 years, right? So we asked some parents of kids from the 70s what their experience was like. Well, this was the best one. A mom was going through old stuff and found this CCD book, put together lovingly, I'm sure, in maybe 1970, right? There's the child wandering aimlessly in this abstracted collage. Anyhow, and this is what the mom opened it up, and this is what she read on the inside. A 9-year-old, a very neat 9-year-old girl. Maureen Campbell. It says, please return to Maureen Campbell, and gives her address, phone number. P.S. I hate CCD, so you don't have to return this book if you don't want to. But maybe you ought to, because my mom would make me pay for a second one. Note, in case of fire, throw this book in. Make sure it is thoroughly destroyed. Really glad the mom didn't throw that in. Anyhow, research is fun. Do you have any questions?
We're going to do all the questions at the end to give everyone a chance, but I did ask him in, and I started with an email address and the name of our study, so if you want to contact that person and say, I'm interested in your study, or we'd like to help you, you can do that. So that information will be there. And next is Victoria. All right.
I'm Victoria Schwartz, and my impetus for the project was twofold. One is that my son and a very good friend of mine's son were almost exactly the same age, and in going through Catechists of Shepherd, both of them had reading difficulties. And so they did not enjoy catechesis after a certain age. And my friend told me that her son really struggled in level 3 because my son we moved churches and we didn't end up attending that CGS in level 3. But our son really had difficulty because everything relied on reading, and he was struggling with that. And so I began to think about that a lot and to think about ways in which we could improve materials or change the materials, adapt them for the needs of children who are, for any reason, struggling readers or late readers. Some of you may remember that several years ago I gave a workshop here just on best practices in general for some of the materials that I saw, because we have quite a variety of scripts and handwritten things in the atrium that were really very difficult for children to read. And so we looked at some of those materials. But I began to think more about that and wanted to really see if we could adapt the materials in 2 or 3 specific ways. The first was just the readability of the materials themselves. I also have learned to do things like adding photographs and more visuals, and to maybe at some point include audio along with them, because my son learned very well about reading and hearing it at the same time. So the first step was to, what I thought was going to be to make some sample materials and send them out. But that didn't come about this year, but what happened was that I began to interview both adult and children who had reading difficulties, and found out that some of the things that are considered best practices by experts were not really meeting the needs of these people. That indeed it was highly variable. Follow the child, right? And every child is a little bit different in how they see things, just physically and neurologically. So I had to step back a little bit. And so what I'm hoping to do now, and I'm asking for help because I want a pretty broad sample to do this, is that I'm going to evaluate, have teachers sit down with students and evaluate just some basic things like type size, font, and colors of background papers. So what I'm envisioning is that I would make an instrument that would enable teachers to do that, and then they take a few minutes after a hearing session and interview a few kids at a time. And that would include everybody, not just children who are struggling with materials, but just everyone to see if there is a majority of kids who prefer things a certain way. But I also want to look at the ones who you know are struggling and how they respond to materials in the same way or differently than others. So that's my first and next step in putting together the project. And if you have any interest, if you have any children in your age room that you've been concerned about because of their lack of response to materials, because of reading difficulties, then I would really appreciate your help and input for the project.
Judy, Beth, and I share the elementary age group at the Student Montessori School. I'm the upper elementary catechist, and Judy Beth does some lessons with upper elementary and lower. She's also the lower elementary catechist. We started thinking about how children are using the materials in the 9 to 12 age group. And at the same time, we have a new record-keeping system called Transparent Classroom, which the school is using. So that helped us in just tracking for last year how often a material was used and who was doing it. So we looked at girls and boys, we looked at 4th year, 5th year, and 6th year children, and the things we found.
We didn't even start out knowing that we wanted to look at gender or year, but once we got the data, it became, we were wanting to look at that. So, or it became something of interest. So if you can't really see it, we put it back here, but we've got results based on the age of the children, based on gender, and then based on materials that were presented but were not worked with. So we have a whole table of materials that were not worked with, and looking at which ones were presented. So we haven't gone really too deeply into analyzing it. We're welcoming your thoughts and questions on it, so it's posted back here. And we've started looking at it for what we're wanting to try differently this year. We're going to continue collecting data this year and then hope after 2 or 3 years to have enough data to really hopefully come to some other ideas about what we can do to improve our practice for level 3.
You want to write your name and email
Okay. Yeah, and we've got Post-its here, so we welcome your thoughts through that as well, kind of interactive with the data back there.
Anita,
Hi, I'm Anita Vincent, L'Oreal. And just going off of what Amanda started with, we were interested in seeing what the long-term effects of CGS, having been through CGS, were as opposed to those that had not been in CGS, just gone through a regular parish, traditional religious education program. And we did a very formal academic sort of, being the academic, I kind of drove the study for the most part. And John Chattin-McNichols also being an academic. So we wanted the control group that had not been in CGS and the group that had been in CGS. We controlled the age grouping between age 18 and 25. And Nora had CGS in her parish for long enough for us to sample the CGS group, and she found another church where the non-CGS group would come from, and I was working with a group in Indiana with the same kind of CGS and non-CGS group. In putting out the survey and the email, so we'd send out the survey, the Google Forms survey through email, and out of nearly 1,950 emails, we've got so far about 6 responses. So part of the problem we think might be that the 18 to 25-year-old may have difficulty articulating some of that spirituality. And maybe our questions were not quite right there as well. So just for that age group. So at this time, we're going to expand that age group to include up to 35, anytime after high school to about 35. And maybe just do just the CGS groups to even get that data would be interesting without the control group. So at this time, again, like Victoria, we're asking for your help. If you can help us identify atria that have been here long enough, and will be willing to provide us with, individuals who be willing to talk with us or email or somehow for us to collect that data. We appreciate that very, very much.
The only thing I'd add is that you're also thinking about, instead of a survey kind of format, that we come to like a high school retreat or 20s and 30s. My church, my parish here in Washington has a 20s and 30s group, and maybe have a focused discussion where we ask some pretty wide open questions and see what kind of responses we get that way. The lesson to me was that asking a 19 or 20-year-old to talk about their relationship with God, it's asking for no response, and that's pretty much what I mean, it's hard enough. It's hard enough at age 69 to talk about my relationship with God. So it feels like the way we approached it wasn't appropriate for the age of the people that we were trying to talk to. And this is Montessori.
Well, so any thoughts, any suggestions that you might have to help us, and anything we can do to help us reach out to more of these young people would be really greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll put up my email. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm Devette Himes, and Catherine put me last. I knew why. TikTok to that. I could talk ad nauseum about this topic, but I'm going to keep it very short, and I'm going to stay on my bullet points, just like in training. I'm Devette Himes. I'm from Alexandria, Virginia. We're in Northern Virginia, very close here in DC area. We have had toddler parent toddler group / atrium / the nursery was not really meshing with what we were doing catechesis. So we wanted to take some Good Shepherd and take it younger, and with our youngest children in the parish. And our atrium is a little bit different, and I won't speak my talk, just come to the talk. But we've always been evangelism and outreach. And so, in thinking of a question and talking with John, the thing that really interests me as someone who's been doing Catechists for a long time now, we started the toddler atrium in our parish about 2009. So some of the children who were toddlers in that atrium are now at my level 2 and level 3. Right? And the toddler group that we have is interesting because it was really for parents and the child together. And my thinking of having this little toddler group, since our big push was really is evangelism, thinking about the church writ large and the church of the future. Years ago, there was a paper in the Episcopal Church, and it was called Will Our Faith Have Children? And so now we're looking at the church writ large, and we've seen those few studies. Everybody's spiritual, nobody's religious. We know the people who are the nuns, we know the people who, they have a greater power, but now don't go to church. How does this affect our families and young children? Well, maybe they're these bambini of atrium, but now they're at that age where they're having babies. Will they participate in church or not? And what is the thing that draws people to the church and makes them stay? And what we found, magically right before our eyes, was this parent-toddler group. I started out with an anecdote, and John was like, use that! So there was a toddler who is now 4 years old. Our toddler group starts at about 18 months. On Sunday, if you have a diaper and your parent is there and you don't hide, you may come to the atrium. During the week, we aren't as adventurous, so 18 to 36 months, right? And so here I have a 4-year-old who started out in our atrium since literally birth. And there are 2 younger children, 2-year-old, 18-month-old, and they kind of toddled over. Our atrium before is color-coded, so the yellow floor is 3 to 6-year-olds. The green floor is for the toddlers, and you're supposed to stay on the yellow floor. And the toddlers could help themselves, so they're on the yellow floor because there was an older 4-year-old who had a Bible. And they toddled over. They got there. And the 4-year-old looks at them. And quoting Sofia, remember the children who amongst themselves and look at him? So this 4-year-old pulled herself up to her most dignified 4-year-old height and said, I can't read. But she was holding the Holy Bible. And she looked at that 2-year-old and that 18-month-old and she said, but listen, remember, this is God's most holy book and it has our secrets in it for us. Jesus is the king of the Bible. He died and he rose. What are the most essential points of the Christian message then? That's a 4-year-old who is a toddler talking to 2 toddlers. And so the toddlers, wow. So you know what they did? The layout of our atrium is, it's all open, there's no walls. So it's level 1, 2, 3, and toddlers on Sunday, everybody at the same time. It works for us. They went to the toddlers and took the Bible. Oh wait, there's one at baptism. Oh, you took that one? There's another one on the prayer table. I'll go get that one. And then there was a beautiful moment when all around the atrium, the children were like, wow, there's no more Bibles here. And you have those babies intent on the word.
Waiting to get their hands on.
Yes, looking for one. Oh, there's one in baptism in level 2, like totally green floor, way a distance from like And so talking to John, he's like, wow, that's amazing. Is it true? Are they spiritual? Are they playing? Is there religious life even of a 12 to 18-month-old? Right? And so what I posit, and I would love your help in finding out, is how could we test that? So John said, hey, I got an idea for you. How about we take 2 spots in the atrium, the prayer table and the altar. And remember he talked about, I don't know what it was the pink tower with the poker chips, like where did the kid go? I can't recall. So the idea, I don't think I'm going to use poker chips, but the idea would be to have some volunteers, maybe even toying with the idea of toddlers, maybe you've come to a couple of our parent toddler courses. Where did they go? Because that was not the only instance. Because they had a dad in the atrium with his toddler, with his baby, who actually wasn't old enough, she was 16 months, but I said, okay. You know what that 16-month-old did? The same thing. He was like, oh my gosh, there she goes. We're supposed to stay on the green floor. She went to level 2 to the baptism tables where she was headed. We had a little tiny dollar store Bible and the toddlers. Oh, but that was not big enough. So she went over to level 2. The dad thought she was just loose. And he has to retrieve her. She went over to the level 2 baptism table and got, guess what? The Holy Bible. And you know what she did with it? She picked it up. And the dad was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And so, but unfortunately in the church, we're going to be put 12 to 18-month-olds. 18 to 36-month-olds. Where are they? In Siberia. Until you can sit still, right? And so through the study, and I will be here hopefully tomorrow, but Saturday we will have a workshop. If this interests you, I would love to have a cohort of people who'd say, I don't have a toddler or atrium, but tell me what do you have? You need a prayer table and a model altar, and I'll show you how to make it small for toddlers. I'll just scale it to the toddler. I'm going to close on this anecdote because I know I ran over my time. Because this is recent, like literally, like a month ago, had to be August because yeah, school hadn't started yet. I had been away training. I went to Nashville. I was gone. I did a course. I was gone. Apparently, this parent had been driving up past the church, and her toddler, who is now 5 years old, who was part of our parent toddler group, when they drive by the church, they would look up wistfully, and you can't see our church from the street, but they look up wistfully. Like, oh yeah, yes, I remember atrium. And so the mom thought she would come by just to see, hey, Mrs. Hines, we're thinking about you. And then she was persistent, and I said, oh, sit down, because I could tell there's something more. And she said, her son had been asking her a lot about God. And he had questions about God. And the thing about this family was that they didn't go to church. The only church those kids got was coming to our outreach atrium during the week, our, guess what, parent toddler group. And when we started the parent toddler group, one of the things I do is I always make a home visit. So I met the husband, I met the dad, I've been to their home. The father is not Christian. The mother, had some church, but not a lot, and the grandmother was totally something different. And so she said, you know what, I was thinking I would like him to do these things and to know God. And I said to her, yes, because he came to atrium. And so we've had 1, 2, 3 atrium sessions, and so I didn't want to be too pushy. I just said, you know what, we're not doing toddler group right now. You all are welcome, because she had, now she has a 2-year-old. So a couple Sundays ago, she brought her 2-year-old and her 5-year-old to church. Now, they could not sit down, and there's too many books. Like, okay, now you need perfect. Okay, now, wait, now, put that book down now. Now read this book. It was too many books. Okay, now you kneel. Physical gymnastics, but they were hanging in there. And they've come to church every week. And she said her son was missing his old school because what sparked it was kindergarten. He'd never been to school, but he'd been to atrium. And he says, Mrs. Hines, you want to tell me something about Jesus? The first thing he goes to is a mustard seed. And he's telling his 2-year-old sister, now this is the altar, this is where we pray, and this is where we do this, and this is where we do that. And that child who was an 18-month-old, who is that kid that comes in the atrium and who's running from shelf to shelf to shelf. And you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how this is going to work out. He was that kid. And so now here he is, 5 years old, guiding his sister. And now as a family, as a couple, they said, maybe we'll go through this God stuff. So that is my hope for the parent toddler group, because it's different than dropping a child off and saying, oh, take care of them, I'm going to listen to the sermon, because then it's kind of like childcare. How would the church look if we actually supported young families, our baptismal vows, with God's help? So we really did it. So it's interesting. And come to the toddler talk. Parent toddler talk. That's it. Thanks. Thank you.
So I had a very small study. I was hoping to be able to complete it because I wanted to look at the typology materials that came over for the 9-12 material from the 9-12 atrium from Rome. Karen presented them, leaving her gifts to us, 2007. And it was, a timeline with cards to put on it, and a lot of our materials are layout cards. And I remember 9-12 Carol saying to me one time, it seems like all we ever do is layout cards. So I was looking for a way to wrap up that typology study with a material that would engage the children in the room. And so I made a very, very simple timeline with headings. It was completely blank, so I hardly even call it a timeline, but it had headings across the top, and one was the Hebrew study, and you would write in Exodus or whatever the study is that we had done, and then New Testament, and then sacraments, and then daily life, and heresy. And the idea was to choose any type that had emerged from our study and write it in first column, and then see what you could write in all the other columns, and make connections like a golden thread all the way using that type. And so I had an atrium in Nashville using the formal Roman material and giving me results of the engagement of the children as they were doing the work and whether or not there was any repetition of the work. And then at our school, Victoria was also tracking children using this alternate strip, and I had an after-school group that was doing it. So we had an in-school group and an after-school group of kids. And I had one other person who was supposed to send me data, and it never came in from the Roman material. So I got it all kind of assembled. I got it worked out and collected numbers and words, that had been written down and the level of engagement. What I didn't do was the fancy, chart. So that's my next step. And it's a small sampling, but so my goal is to widen that. I still think that I do feel like what I got, in terms of pictures and words and feedback, was a more engaged conversation about typology at the end of the study. But the numbers are small, so that's my work. And my name and number, or my name and email is also there. Before I open this up for your questions, I wanted to just say part of our reason for doing this tonight is to let you know about it and to engage you in one of several levels if you are interested. Okay, so people who would like to do research, that would be one level of engagement. People who would like to collect data for a researcher, that would be a very valuable gift. People who would like to send a gift that would support the next, cohort of research, of helping researchers to begin. Because we had a small group and a very renowned teacher, that was not cheap. So that was an investment of the center, and so we got some support from the Catechists who weren't going to be here, but were willing to support the effort. So if you have questions about what we did, what you saw, of anybody who stood up, or comments about it, or reflections, that would be good. Or was there a question that particularly interested you? I would be curious to know what of our various topics interested you. Yeah.
I just thought because I've some Montessori training, I think one of the best things that can come out of this for anybody who hears about it is helping us as catechists sit and observe. Because we'll all tend to use our mind and our heart to help the child help themselves by making adjustments with the materials that we all need to do and to prepare us to be good researchers as we get more and more just observing. So I'm encouraged by it.
I mean, it is part of what which was a part of who Montessori was. She never set out to be a teacher. You know, she was a scientist, an anthropologist. Her whole focus was observing and seeing how to adjust. You know, so I think Sofia and Gianna definitely took that up, right? They have a whole room in Rome of things that they thought were going to be great, and then they didn't work. So, you know, but they didn't destroy them, they left them there so people were going to dump them out. So, yeah, I agree.
So we, if we're kind of moving on the same path and using action research for data collection, is that when conclusions are drawn only based on one age group, especially if it's a younger set of kids and certain materials, like topics, that catechists may not see what the 12-year-old child, the outcome that grows from this work. And I'm a little, because I was concerned with the use of multicolors when trying to make keyboard, because I am in upper elementary and I see a lot of problems with that. And if they've decided to view it only as a puzzle, a standalone object, that's not healthy for what Dr. Montessori was trying to do with that work, or what I ended up with. Yeah. So I don't know, that was something that I was wondering, how do we make sure the voices from other age groups are reflecting backwards and processing?
So how do you structure research?
Yeah, it's hard to be focused and then also so John this morning as we were finishing said, I'm gonna teach you a word, it's gonna be very useful, pilot study. So this is what I did was considered a pilot study, and whatever conclusions I draw, I know have limitations. And he taught us how to write about the limitations of the study. But nevertheless, it's useful to me, it might be useful to others, it might be an idea for another study, going forward.
Expand a little bit on what the outcome once your intrepid researchers pull their information together and draw whatever conclusion that gets put back out to who and for what purpose and in what form. Can you say a little bit more?
Oh, that was a really big question. we had a full weekend of learning about research from John. That's how we started, and then talking to him about what we wanted to research and how to shape how to do it. And then this time was all about then how to communicate what you observed and conclusions you might draw from that, if there are any. And it might be just my conclusion is I need to do more study. So it's more of a process, and he mentioned papers, and I actually did write a paper. It's just not finished, but that was a format that was useful to me because I'm used to doing that. But papers or posters, which might be pulling out from a paper, put it up. this would be a seminal poster. Academic conferences and even Montessori conferences now have poster sessions. And people just stand by the research they did and explain it to people walking in a hall of 500 posters or 200 posters that research from. So those would be two ways. I'm hoping the website can be a place where we can post then the papers that we get. And it would include things like, well, this was really only, children of a certain socioeconomic group or children, of a certain denomination. So you might want to do more research to building on that to make it useful too. But like the decibel one, we can all start with something. We can all practice that in our age and try it, and then decide what we like. So some of them are more easily applied.
I think it gives us ideas when we're looking at training too. If there are certain presentations that people are struggling with, that they don't get as much use in their age band, and maybe those are ones the trainers focus on more, because sometimes it's delivery of the lesson. If something falls flat in the delivery, and I know at our school, some of us were trained as Bergamo, some were trained as Montessori teachers, some are trained in the States, and when we look at certain material, sometimes the other person has better lessons. Some of us were trained in San Diego more recently, and we find, oh gosh, I like your lesson better.
So we can check.
One of the things that Beth and I were discussing our findings, such as they are so far, was can we group lessons by most frequently used, and break them up, and then start looking at characteristics of that possibly say the saint's word or the labyrinth may have that could attract boys or girls for 5 years or 4 years or 6 years. We've already decided that we really jazzed up sacraments with finding more self-study and then asking them to do a synthesis, to take a type or something and see if they could find that same aspect of each sacrifice. We got some lovely detailed work that took a lot of time that increased the usage of the sacraments. It's like scarcely flying off the shelves. They're not popular. But the fact that we were asked for certain things to be shared as group project meant that, that was something like the labyrinth, or the material might be attractive because I can sit next to that, and she can use the needlepoint, and I can use the labyrinth, so we get or the prodigal son might be a good material because Leslie might come together. Material. We get to talk, and that's such. So we've already been looking at these results that I kind of looked at the chart, and then we put them on poster and started grouping things, and already I've decided, okay, we might do my hands on in a break group. I'm going to all the students at once and started doing so that kind of just like that's not science, except it might be useful to just say, for training or asking patiently how we made information interesting.
And I can actually just mention like in what form or what would be the role for this information. One of the things that intrigues me about working with the families, because I do age family ministry, and
thinking along the lines of lifelong formation, what will formation look like in the next 20 years, next 30 years, sort of taking that 40,000 foot view and thinking future church. And when you sort of, I'll talk to knowing your demographics, knowing your denomination, knowing what's happening in the church, future growth, where is it coming from, and anecdotally, I can speak to the parent model group and how it really has in your parish very different than sort of the demographic that's when you think of like most mainline churches. Whereabouts is it thriving? And I know there are atria that are closing, and there are parishes that are closing. And I sort of feel like if we can tap into serving these families, our kids will have children in the future. I don't think we'll have families. But I can't just speak anecdotally about my one parish, ASA, 75 people. It would be nice to have a standpoint from around the country and saying, wow, there's some there, and there, and there, and there. And what's missing is the will and the funding, support, however you want to say it, to look beyond youth. The economist says the president button and not pop jobs. The church press a button and out pop youth. Where do you think that come from? Where are these families? And so I'm hoping through this group of catechists, this might be something that people could look at that could help the church as a whole. And we can help each other. Because I'm looking at the level 2 and 3 families. What stuck them to the parish? They came at 18 months or so here.
That's a really big point of possibilities for research. Okay, thank you all for your attention. These people are available to you. Please let us know if you would like to work with us on any particular project or if you have a project that you really want to talk about. I got a text during this session from Alice Liu. She's on a train in Taiwan watching the live stream. So hello, Alice. And we know one person who watched it. So it was worth it just for that. Wow. So have a good evening, and we will begin here. Well, coffee's on at 7 in the dining room. And then we'll start in here at about 9.
So breakfast is 8.
Yes.